Ignited Minds, Chapter 2, Give us a role model. Men often become what they believe themselves to be. If I believe I cannot do something, it makes me incapable of doing it. But when I believe I can, then I acquire the ability to do it even if I didn't have it in the beginning. Mahatma Gandhi. Why should I meet young students in particular? Seeking the answer, I went back to my student days. From the island of Rameshwaram, what a great journey it's been. Looking back, it all seems quite incredible. What was it that made it possible? Hard work, ambition, many things come to my mind. I feel the most important thing was that I always assessed my worth by the value of my contribution. The fundamental thing is that you must know that you deserve the good things of life, the benefits that God bestows. Unless our students and young believe that they are worthy of being citizens of a developed India, how will they ever be responsible and enlightened citizens? There is nothing mysterious about the abundance in developed nations. The historic fact is that the people of these nations, the Great Eight, they are called, believed over many generations that they must live a good life in a strong and prosperous nation. The reality became aligned with their aspirations. I do not think that abundance and spirituality are mutually exclusive or that it is wrong to desire material things. For instance, while I personally cherish a life with minimum of possessions, I admire abundance for it brings along with it security and confidence, and these eventually help preserve our freedom. Nature too does not do anything by half measures, as you will see if you look around you. Go to a garden in season, there is a profusion of flowers, or look up, the universe stretches into infinitude, vast beyond belief. All that we see in the world is an embodiment of energy. We are a part of the cosmic energy too, as Sri Aurobindo says. Therefore, when we begin to appreciate that spirit and matter are both part of existence, are in harmony with each other, we shall realize that it is wrong to feel that it is somehow shameful or non spiritual to desire material things. Yet, this is what we are often led to believe. Certainly, there is nothing wrong with an attitude of making do with the minimum in leading a life of aestheticism. Mahatma Gandhi led such a life, but in his case, as in yours, it has to be a matter of choice. You follow such a lifestyle because it answers a need that arises from deep within you. However, making a virtue of sacrifice and what is forced upon you to celebrate suffering is a different thing altogether. It was the basis of my decision to contact our young, to know their dreams and tell them that it is perfectly all right to dream of a good life, an abundant life, a life full of pleasures and comforts, and work for that golden era. Whatever you do must come from the heart. Express your spirit, and thereby you will also spread love and joy around you. My first such meeting took place in a high school in Tripura. It was a gathering of 100 students and teachers. After my talk on the second vision for transforming India into a developed nation, there were a series of questions, two of which I would like to discuss. The first question was, where do we get a role model from? How do you get a role model? Whether we are aware of it or not, from childhood onwards, through various phases of life, we adopt role models. I said, when you are growing up, say till the age of 15, the best role model I can think of would be your father, your mother, and your school teacher. They, to my mind, are the people who can impart the best guidance during the period. I turned to the teachers and parents present there and told them what a big responsibility they have. I personally believe the full development of a child with a value system can only come from these people. In my own home, when I was growing up, I used to see my father and mother say namaz 5 times a day, and in spite of their modest financial resources, I found them always giving to the needy around. My teacher, Siva Subramaniam Iyer, was responsible for persuading my father to send me to school setting aside financial constraints. It is very important for every parent to be willing to make the effort to guide children to be good human beings, enlightened and hardworking. The teacher, the student's window to learning and knowledge has to play the role model in generating creativity in the child. This triangle is indeed a real role model I can think of. I would even go to the extent of saying that if parents and teachers show the required dedication to shape the lives of young, India would get a new life. As it is said, behind the parent stands the school, and behind the teacher, the home. Education and the teacher-student relationship has to be seen not in business terms but with the nation's growth in mind. A proper education would help nurture a sense of dignity and self-respect among our youth. These are qualities no law can enforce. They have to be nurtured ourselves. The children enjoyed this answer, though I don't know whether the parents and the teachers got the message. Another girl, in all seriousness, asked, every day we read in the newspaper or hear our parents talk about Atankwadis, terrorists. Who are they? Do they belong to our country? This question really shocked me. I myself was searching for an answer. They are our own people. Sometimes we create them through political and economic isolation, or they can be fanatics, sometimes sponsored by hostile nations trying to disrupt normal life through terrorism. I looked at the audience, at the people sitting by my side, at the teachers, and at the sky for an answer, and I said, children, I am reminded of our epic, the Ramayana and Mahabharata. In the Ramayana, the battle is between the divine hero Ram and the demon king Ravana. It is a long-drawn battle that finally Rama wins. In the Mahabharata, there is the battle at Kurukshetra. In this fight between good and evil, Dharma wins again. The battles are many, but finally peace triumphs. In our times too, we have seen this battle between good and evil, for instance, the Second World War. It seems to me that both good and evil will survive side by side. The Almighty does help them both to various degrees. How to minimize the evil through our spiritual growth is a question that has persisted throughout human history. On another occasion, I addressed a very large gathering of students at St. Mary's School, Dindigul in Tamil Nadu on their 75th anniversary celebrations. Among the large number of children wishing to meet me were two who were in a hurry to get an answer from me. One student asked, I have read your book Agni Siragugal, the Tamil version of Wings of Fire. You always give a message to dream. Tell me why dream. Tell me why dream. My answer was to ask the gathered students to recite the following. Dream, dream, dream. Dream transforms into thoughts. Thoughts result in action. I told them, friends, if there are no dreams, there are no revolutionary thoughts. If there are no thoughts, no actions will emanate. Hence, parents and teachers should allow their children to dream. Success always follows dreams attempted through there may be some setbacks and delays. Though there may be some setbacks and delays. Another boy asked, please tell me who would be the first scientist in the world. It occurred to me science was born and survives only by questions. The whole foundation of science is questioning, and as parents and teachers well know, children are the source of unending questions. Hence, child is a first scientist. I replied. There was thunderous applause. The children enjoyed this different way of thinking. Teachers and parents also smiled at the answer. During my visit to Assam, I visited Tezpur. I had gone for the convocation ceremony of Tezpur University and also to receive the honorary doctorate conferred on me. After the convocation, I took off to meet school children. It was a big gathering of young people. The theme of the address was Indomitable Spirit. As soon as I finished my talk, all youngsters mobbed me for autographs. When I finished giving autographs, I faced two interesting questions. One was, why cannot water from the Brahmaputra, which is in flood, much of the time be diverted to Rajasthan or Tamil Nadu, which are starved of water? Only children will have these innovative ideas. Grown-ups tend to see more impossibilities. It was such a powerful question, I was completely beaten. I was sure even the Prime Minister would not have been able to answer it. How to tell the boy rivers are a state subject and our states are fighting for the right to their waters. That these would bring them prosperity someday, but meanwhile they were flowing wastefully into the sea and causing floods every year. How to answer it? I said Indian Vision 2020 demands from the young that they start a great mission of connecting rivers cutting across the state. I personally feel the young have the most powerful minds. They can overcome the negativity of the bureaucracy and some self-centered policies of the state governments to enrich the people of the country. They can even improve coordination between the states and the center, and they surely will. Another student asked me a question for which again I had no ready answer. He said, Sir, big leaders in any field don't come and talk to us. We see our Prime Minister often going to Chennai, Lucknow, many places, but he never comes here. We want him, we want to talk to him. I'm impressed by this urge to communicate with the country's leaders, I said. When I reach Delhi, I will tell your dream to the leaders and your dreams will come true. I later narrated this to the Prime Minister. He considered the point and said, Children don't talk to me anymore. Maybe the security cordon has created a separation. I request our leaders in different fields to interact more with the children of the country for a better understanding of their own purpose in life and also for helping create a better future for our children. I have visited Jharkhand a number of times after its formation. Every time I visit it, I am struck by the tremendous resource that wait to be harnessed in the state, which will multiply its wealth manifold. At the Sri Ramakrishna High School, Bokaro, I addressed a gathering of 3,000 students and saw their creativity on display in an exhibition of their paintings, toys, and other items made by them. In my conversation with them, one student asked me, in Jharkhand, it is green everywhere. We have forests, streams, and hills. Why is it that we have a desert in Rajasthan? The question reminded me of a similar one in Assam. Why cannot the Brahmaputra water be taken to Tamil Nadu and Rajasthan? 20 years ago, you would not have seen much cultivation in Rajasthan. But once the Indira Gandhi Canal was constructed, agriculture became possible in many places. It is possible for man to transform the desert into a fertile land. I repeated what I had told the student in Assam. It has to be one of the greatest missions of India to connect rivers so that water can reach many water-starved states. Visionary action is needed. When you grow up, you will probably be part of the constructing this nation and giving shape to these thoughts. One child came to me with a serious expression and asked, Sir, will your Agni missile cross the ocean and reach America? I was a little startled by this thought. For us, no country is our enemy to send Agni there. Particularly, America is our friend. Agni symbolizes our strength. It shows that India has all the capabilities. During my visit to Cuttack, I participated in the birthday celebration of the late Justice Harihar Mahapatra. I went there at the invitation of Justice Ranganath Mishra. For me, it was a revelation how the independence movement, the first vision for the nation, had created the larger-than-life figure of Justice Harihar Mahapatra. He lived to the age of 92 and established Cuttack Eye Hospital, Utkal University, and above all, organized multi-pronged efforts to remove poverty. My biography in Oriya was released. At the end of my speech, the youngsters crowded around put forth many questions. The first question was, Sir, tell us which are your favorite books that you loved and which have shaped your mind. I said 4 books in my life have been very close to my heart. I cherish reading them. The first is Man the Unknown by Dr. Alexis Carrel, a doctor turned philosopher and a Nobel laureate. This book highlights how the mind and body both have to be treated in an alignment as the two are integrated. You cannot treat one and ignore the other. In particular, children who dream of becoming doctors should read the book. They will learn that the human body is not a mechanical system. It is a very intelligent organism with the most intricate and sensitive feedback system. The second book, one I venerate, is Thiruvalluvar's Thirukural, which provides an excellent code of life. The third is Light from Many Lamps by Lillian Ayler Watson, which has touched me deeply. It illuminates how we live and has been an invaluable guide to me for 50 years. And the Holy Quran is, of course, a constant companion. While I was addressing another gathering of school children in Anand, Gujarat, one smart boy asked a very intelligent question, who is our enemy? I liked the question but put it to the other students, encouraging them to come forward with their views. Then came the answer poverty. What a wise reaction from this young child whom I have mentioned in the dedication. The last question which I am including here came from the powerful mind of another child. Tell me, sir, are Pakistani weapons stronger than the Indian ones? I asked the child why this doubt arose in his mind. Reports he read in the media led him to think so, he said. This is a unique characteristics of our country, to belittle our capabilities. It may even be genetic, I said. India can design, develop, produce any type of missile and any type of nuclear weapon. This is a capability only 4 countries in the world have. You remove all the doubts from your mind, I told the child, who gave me a very satisfied look. I have selected only 11 questions here from among the hundreds of questions I have been asked during the course of meeting 40,000 high school students so far. The questions reflect the children's innocence, but most of all, they show how strongly they feel the desire to live in a strong and prosperous nation. I also realized from these sessions how important it is for them to have role models, whether in science, industry, sports, entertainment, or some other field. The question is, can we give our children a role model, and how? At the dawn of the new millennium came the news that the human genome had been decoded. All the 30,000 genes that human beings carry today, we are told, are identical to those of our Stone Age ancestors who lived thousands of years ago. One of the traits has come down to us from them, along with others that are needed for survival, is the desire for achievement. It is said that nature gave us this instinct because the need to achieve, like the need to reproduce, the need to eat, the need to drink, and the need to breathe, is simply too important to be left to chance. History shows the hunger for achievement is a highly evolved one and undoubtedly the strongest one. We tend to forget it, but it underlines much of our experience. Most important, without it, how would we learn and grow and aspire to greater perfections? I have seen Dr. Vikram Sarabhai's vision succeeding over 3 decades through sustained and coordinated achievements. At work in that and any other endeavor was this same desire to exceed the limits. As we try and excel, role models play a guiding role. The power of Vikram Sarabhai was such that others took up his vision and completed it long after he was no more. For if you could be someone else whom you admire, a sportsperson, a teacher, a successful entrepreneur. I recently had the chance to meet a legendary personality, a role model herself. Lata Mangeshkar was presiding over a function in remembrance of her father, Master Dinanath Mangeshkar. Later, Lata Mangeshkar is the recipient of the Bharat Ratna, and I felt honored that she had asked me to inaugurate the 450-bed Dinanath Hospital and Research Center in Pune. I visited the hospital just before the inauguration. I found that it would be treating nearly 30% of the patients free. I was touched by the fact that despite her wealth and fame, she had not lost sight of the fact that one needs to do all one can to help relieve the suffering of the others. Her songs played over the radio have brought pleasure to countless hearts over the decades, and during the India-China conflict in 1962, her song "Hey Mere Watan Ke Logon" moved the entire nation. Few people can claim to have influenced the lives of millions in such a delightful way. Role models can help us focus on what is correct for us as individuals, as groups, and of course as nation. They can also lead us to great success. We seem to have got carried away with the success of a few in the field of information technology, but that is indeed nothing compared to what we can and should achieve. Ancient India was a knowledge society and a leader in many intellectual pursuits, particularly in the fields of mathematics, science, and astronomy. A renaissance is imperative for us to once again become a knowledge superpower rather than simply providing cheap labor in areas of high technology. Summary: a nation's wealth is the young generation of the country. When they grow up, who can be the role models? Mother, father, and elementary school teachers play a very important part as role models. When a child grows up, the role models will be national leaders of quality and integrity in every field, including politics, science, technology, and industry. Visionary Teachers and Scientists, Chapter 3. Whatever you can do or dream can be Begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now. Go. Gothi. The great mind of the country had the ability to make others join their endeavor to convert dreams into reality. For them, the nation was bigger than themselves and they could draw thousands to act upon their dreams. In December 2000, I had participated in the birth centenary celebration of Adhyapaka Ratna T. Totadri Iyengar. I graduated in science from St. Joseph's College, Tiruchirappalli, 1954. As a young student, I saw Professor T. Totadri Iyengar, a unique, divine-looking personality, walking through the college campus every morning and teaching mathematics to students of BSc Honours and MSc. The students looked at him with awe, as one would at a guru, which indeed he was. When he walked, knowledge radiated all around. At that time, Calculus Srinivasan was my mathematics teacher. He used to talk about Professor Totadri Iyengar with deep respect and would organize integrated classes for first year BSc Honours and first year BSc Physics to be taught by him. I also had the opportunity to attend some of these classes, particularly on the subjects of modern algebra and statistics. When we were in the first year BSc Calculus, Srinivasan used to pick the top 10 students as members of Mathematics Club of St. Joseph's, where Professor Totadri Iyengar used to give a lecture series. One day in 1952, he gave a lecture on ancient mathematicians and astronomers of India. He spoke for nearly 1 hour. The lecture still rings in my ears. Let me share with you my thoughts about some ancient mathematicians, glimpses of whom I saw in Professor Totadri Iyengar in my own way. Aryabhatta, born in 476 AD in Kusumapura, now called Patna, was an astronomer and mathematician. He was reputed to be a repository of all the mathematical knowledge known at that point of time. He was only 23 years old when he wrote Aryabhattiyam in 2 parts. The text covers arithmetic, algebra, trigonometry, and of course astronomy. He gave formulae for the areas of triangle and a circle and attempted to give the volume of sphere and a pyramid. He was the first to give an approximation to pi as the ratio of a circle's circumference and diameter, arriving at the value of 3.1416. To celebrate his great astronomy, India named its first satellite launched in 1975 Aryabhatta. Brahmagupta was born in 598 AD at Billamala in Rajasthan in the empire of Harsha. He wrote the Brahma Sputa Siddhanta at the age of 30. He updated work of astronomy. He covered progressions and geometry. He also studied and gave what is known as the solution of indeterminate equation of different degrees as well as solutions to quadratic equations. Bhaskaracharya was another unique intellectual of his time. He was born in 1114 AD at Vijayabhada, located at what is now the border of Karnataka and Maharashtra. He wrote the famous Siddhanta Shiromani in 4 chapters. He dealt with astronomy and algebra and is known to be the first recognized mathematician who evolved value to zero from the concept based on Aryabhatta's discovery. To honor him, ISRO's second series of satellites were named Bhaskara 1 and 2 in 1979 and 1981. The work of these 3 mathematicians of India provides the context of Albert Einstein's remark that we owe a lot to the Indians who taught us how to count, without which no worthwhile scientific discovery would have been made. Then comes to my mind the greatest of all genius ever known and acknowledged, and who lived within our present memory, Srinivasa Ramanujam. He lived only for 33 years, from 1887 to 1920, and had no practical formula for formal education or means of living. Yet his inexhaustible spirit and love for his subject enabled him to make a vast contribution to mathematical research, and some of his contributions are still under serious study, engaging the efforts of mathematicians to establish formal proofs. Ramanujam was a unique Indian genius who could melt the art of as rigorous a mathematician as Professor G.H. Hardy of Trinity College, Cambridge. In fact, it is not an exaggeration to say that it was Hardy who discovered Ramanujam for the world. Why do not our reputed scientists locate another Ramanujam in our schools? Oh, my dear friends, why don't you, in every field, integrate and grow instead of differentiating? Every integer is a personal friend of Ramanujam. One of the tributes to Ramanujam said, and it was no exaggeration. Professor Hardy, while rating geniuses on a scale of 100, put most of them in the range of around 30, giving a ratio of 60 to the rare exceptions. However, for Ramanujam, he suggested only the value of 100 would fit. There can be no better tribute to either Ramanujam or to the Indian heritage. Ramanujam's works covers vast areas including prime numbers, hypergeometric series, modular functions, elliptical functions, mock theta functions, even magic squares, apart from some serious work on the geometry of ellipses, squaring, the circle, and so on. I hope that eminent teachers who teach and inspire the young students of mathematics will continue the unmatched and noble services in the years to come, thus ensuring the march of Indian brilliance in this field. Professor S. Chandrasekhar, the astrophysicist, continued the Indian mathematics tradition in his work abroad. Of course, mathematics is universal. Now the tradition will further blossom with the efforts of Professor C. S. Seshadri, Professor J. V. Narlikar, Professor M. S. Narsimhan, Professor S. R. S. Varadan, Professor M. S. Raghunathan, Professor Narendra Karmakar, and Professor Ashok Sen, among others. Sir C. V. Raman started his career in the office of the Accountant General, Calcutta, but the scientist in him would not let him rest and and he was always probing for answers to some of the problems that interested him. Fortunately, he was supported by the great educationist Ashutosh Mukherjee, who encouraged Sir C. V. Raman to pursue his research. It is noteworthy that the Raman effect, the discovery of which brought him the Nobel Prize, did not come out of a grand establishment set up at vast expense. I believe the urge to show to the world the excellence of Indian minds would have been a major motivating factor for Sir C.V. Raman. The same in the case with Professor S. Chandrasekhar, also Nobel laureate for his work on black holes. There are some interesting statements in his biography, Chandra, by Kameshwar C. Wali. As it points out, Chandra grew up in what was a golden age for science, art, and literature in India, spurred on partly by the struggle for independence. J.C. Bose, C.V. Raman, Meghnad Saha, Srinivas Ramanujan, and Rabindranath Tagore, by their achievements in scientific and creative endeavors, became national heroes along with Jawaharlal Nehru, Mahatma Gandhi, and a host of others. Possibly the great success helped produce an atmosphere of creativity. Howsoever it may be, it is worth noting, as Chandrasekhar observed, that in the modern era before 1910, there were no Indian scientists of international reputation or standing. Between 1920 and 25, we had suddenly 5 to 6 internationally well-known men. I myself have associated with this remarkable phenomena with the need for self-expression, which became an dominant motive among the young during the national movement. It was a part of the national movement to assert oneself. India was a subject country, but particularly in science, we could show the West in their own realms that we were equal to them. Here I would like to quote Sir C.V. Raman, who said in 1969, while addressing young graduates, I would like to tell the young men and women before me not to lose hope and courage. Success can only come to you by courageous devotion to the task lying in front of you. I can assert without fear of contradiction that the quality of the Indian mind is equal to the quality of all Teutonic, Nordic, or Anglo-Saxon minds. What we lack is perhaps courage. What we lack is perhaps driving force. Which takes one anywhere. We have, I think, developed an inferiority complex. I think what is needed in India today is the destruction of that defeatist spirit. We need a spirit of victory, a spirit that will carry us to our rightful place under the sun, a spirit which can recognize that we, as inheritors of a proud civilization, are entitled to our rightful place on this planet. If that indomitable spirit were to arise, nothing can hold us from achieving our rightful destiny. Further afield, there are similarly the emergence of others who were great in their respective fields. Interestingly, a music trinity of great saints, Tyagaraja Swamigal, Muthuswami Dikshidhar, and Shyama Shastrigal also emerged at the same time in South India within a 50-kilometer radius. What we should note is that the movement for independence generated the best of leaders in art, science, technology, economics, history, and literature who stand with the best in the world. In more recent times too, we have seen the emergence of great visionary scientists. Particularly, I am interested in the lives of three scientists, Dr. D.S. Kothari, Dr. Homi J. Baba, Dr. Vikram Sarabhai. I wanted to learn more about their leadership qualities in the scientific and technological fields which help link these to the development of nation. They are the founders of three great institutions, DRDO, DAE, and ISRO. Dr. D.S. Kothari, professor of Delhi University, was an outstanding physicist and astrophysicist. He is well known for ionization of matter by pressure in cold compact objects like planets. This theory is complementary to the epoch-making theory of thermal ionization of his guru, Meghnad Saha. Dr. D.S. Kothari set a scientific tradition in Indian defense task when he became scientific advisor to Defense Minister in 1948. The first thing he did was to establish the Defense Science Center to do research in electronic materials, nuclear medicine, and ballistic science. He is considered the architect of defense science in India. We are celebrating this great mind through a research chair at the Indian Institute of Science. Dr. Baba did research in theoretical physics at Cambridge University. From 1930 to 1939, Homi Baba carried out research relating to cosmic radiation. In 1939, he joined Sir C.V. Raman at IIS Science, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. Later, he founded the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research with focus on nuclear and mathematical sciences. He established the Atomic Energy Commission in 1948. This vision led to the setting up of numerous centers in the field of nuclear science and technology, such as those for producing nuclear power or for research in nuclear medicines. These science institutions generate further technological centers, keeping nuclear science as the vital component. Dr. Sarabhai, the youngest of the three, had worked with Sir C.V. Raman in experimental cosmic rays. He established the Physical Research Laboratory at Ahmedabad with space research at the focus. In 1963, Tumba Equatorial Rocket Launching Station began launching sounding rockets for atmospheric research. Dr. Sarabhai established the Space Science and Technology Center and was its director. His vision led to the establishment of ISRO with its Allied Center responsible for development of launch vehicle satellite missions management and application. These three Indian scientists, all of them physicists, started physics research institutions that blossomed into defense technology, nuclear technology, and space technology, which now employs 20,000 scientists in centers spread around the country. One thing I noted was that all three realized the importance of making the political leadership understand what science could do for the country. It is essential that the technologies that give immediate benefits to the people be taken up for implementation by the system regardless of which party is in power. Another important message conveyed by these scientists is that basic science is vital for growth of technology and for developing new leaders in science. Let us learn from them the proven quality of leadership to value science and technology in an integrated way. In 1962, Dr. Sarabhai and Dr. Baba were looking for a site to establish the space research station in the equatorial region. Tumba in Kerala was found most suitable as it was near the equatorial region and was ideally suited for ionospheric research. The locality, however, was inhabited by thousands of fishermen living in the village there. It also had a beautiful church called St. Mary's Magdalene's Church and the Bishop's House. As such, the acquisition of land did not move any further. Dr. Sarabhai met the Bishop, His Excellency Reverend Dr. Peter Bernard Pereira, on a Saturday and requested transfer of the property. The Bishop smiled and asked him to meet him the next day. In the Sunday morning service, the Bishop told the congregation, "My children, I have a famous scientist with me who wants a church and the place I live for the work of space science and research. Science seeks truth that enriches human life. The higher levels of religion is spirituality. The spiritual preachers seek the help of the Almighty to bring peace to the human minds. In short, what Vikram is doing is what I am doing are the same. Both science and spirituality seek the Almighty's blessings for human prosperity in mind and body. Children, can we give them God's abode for a scientific mission? There was silence for a while, followed by a hearty amen from the congregation, which made the whole church reverberate. It was indeed a great experience working with Dr. Sarabhai from 63 to 71 as a young engineer engaged in the tasks of composite technology, explosive systems, and rocket engineering systems at the Thiruvananthapuram Space Center. I drew tremendous energy from his leadership. Though the nation was in its technological infancy, Dr. Sarabhai was dreaming of developing our own satellite launch vehicles. These would be used to launch from Indian soil remote sensing satellites in sun's synchronous orbit and communication satellite in geosynchronous orbit. Today, his vision is almost realized with the launch of geosynchronous launch vehicle. ISRO has also operationalized the IRS and INSAT systems, thereby bringing the benefits of space to the common man. There is an experience I would like to share with you in relation to Dr. Sarabhai's vision for space programs. I wrote briefly in Wings of Fire about this episode. The design project of India's first satellite launch vehicle was taken up at the Vikram Sarabhai Space Center. The design of each stage of rocket heat shield and guidance system was given to selected project leaders. I was given the design project of the fourth stage of SLV-3, that is the upper stage rocket, which would give the final velocity to put Rohini into orbit. This fourth stage uses an advanced composite material that provides high strength with minimum weight. It also has maximum loading of high energy solid propellant. While we were developing the design of this upper stage in 1970, I received a call from Dr. Sarabhai from Ahmedabad stating that he would be visiting Thiruvananthapuram along with Professor Hubert Kurian, chairman of CNES, the French space agency. I was asked to give a presentation about the fourth stage to Professor Kurian's team. When the presentation was over, we realized that SLV-3 fourth stage was also being considered as upper stage for the French Diamond P4 launch vehicle. The CNES needed an apogee rocket motor, nearly double the propellant weight and also size of the stage that we had designed. A decision was then taken in the same meeting with the fourth stage that the fourth stage should be reconfigured to match and suit both Diamond P4 and SLV-3. I mentioned this episode because of the time this decision was taken. We ourselves were in the design stage. Such was Dr. Sarabhai's confidence in the Indian scientific community. Development work on this stage started ahead of the other stages of SLV-3. With our motivation thus boosted, work proceeded in full swing. A series of reviews took place between the two teams, and the fourth stage graduated from drawing board to developing stage. Unfortunately, in 1971, Dr. Sarabhai passed away, and at the same time, the French government called off the Diamond P4 program. Once the fourth stage was developed and a series of tests were going on, a new requirement appeared on the horizon in the form of Indian building a small communication satellite to be launched by the European Ariane launch vehicle. For the Apple Ariane passenger payload experiment communication satellite, the SLV-3 fourth stage proved a perfect fit, and it was concluded in the payload of the Ariane launch in 1981 from Kourou, French Guiana. The vision seeded in 1970 by Dr. Vikram Sarabhai was indeed realized when Apple was placed in geostationary orbit and started communicating with our Earth stations. Apple's success proved that a vision with committed scientist support will achieve its aim. This achievement came as a fantastic fillip to the rocket technology in the country. The visionary may not be with us today, but his vision gets realized. The dream of Dr. Sarabhai was shaped into reality by Professor Satish Dhawan. After he took charge of ISRO in 1972, Professor Satish Dhawan structured and nurtured ISRO with a space profile, and his work led to many significant accomplishments and benefits from a number of remote sensing and communication satellites. The Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle accomplished the feat of launching multiple satellites for India and other countries, injecting them in different orbits in a single mission. I learned an important lesson in management from Professor Dhawan when I was appointed Professor Director SLV-3 in 1972 to design, develop and launch the first satellite launch vehicle to inject Rohini into near-Earth orbit. This was that when a project director is appointed, the whole organization, including the chairman ISRO, works for its success. Is this a lesson? It is a lesson that has been of abiding value all through the other projects I have worked on. The other things I have learned after more than 40 years of working in 3 departments and various projects and programs is that you will succeed as a project leader as long as you remember that the project is bigger than you. Wherever the project leader tries to make himself out to be bigger than the project, the enterprise suffers. I recall my working at ISRO headquarters, Bangalore, as Director Launch Vehicle Program Systems in the 1980s when we were debating the performance and cost effectiveness of launch vehicles. In 1981, the scientists of VSSC Thiruvananthapuram, with the help of other ISRO centers, evolved a configuration of the PSLV core vehicle with 2 large strap-on boosters. The PSLV weighed about 400 tons at takeoff. Professor Dhawan wanted to study an alternative and simple configuration. I and some of my colleagues, A. Shivanathu Pillai, A. Sundar Rajan and K. Padmanabha Menon, carried out mission, technology and feasibility studies for the optimal configuration. The team designed several options including a unique core vehicle with an advanced solid propellant booster using first stage rockets of SLV-3 as strap-on. This brought the PSLV weight down to only about 275 tons at takeoff. Professor Dhawan used to come almost daily to my small room, which was close to his office, and debate the possible configuration choice. He was himself a foremost aerodynamic specialist with mathematics and systems engineering background and would illustrate his ideas on the background and ask us to do more homework. He also studied the growth opportunities of PSLV with cryogenic upper stage as a GSLV and the possibility of launching due east geosynchronous missions. Professor Dhawan put the 2 most favored configurations up for discussion among the experts and the ISRO teams. Detailed examination debate taking the long-term plans into account took place and they chose a PSLV configuration as proposed by my launch vehicle team. Professor Dhawan considered the future scenario of operationalization of PSLV and GSLV, bearing in mind the satellites and application programs, and decided on this unique configuration and evolved a roadmap for ISRO for the next 15 years. I and Professor Narasimha brought out a book, Development in Fluid Mechanics and Space Technology, with Professor Dhawan's handwritten 15-year space program profile based on the chosen PSLV configuration. A memorable day for me in 31st May 1982, Professor Dhawan gave me a send-off in an unconventional way. He called an ISRO council meeting to discuss the future launch vehicle program. I made a presentation to the directors of ISRO Center on performance and cost effectiveness of a launch vehicle and the growth profile. After the presentation, Professor Dhawan broke the news that he had given me to DRDO. This decision indeed gave me a chance that led to progress in a different field. To see today self-reliance in launch vehicle technology with PSLV operational and GSLV getting ready to be operational, this is close to the direction envisaged in the early 1980s by Professor Dhawan. The recognition of ISRO as a successful organization was due to the strong foundation and space profile envisioned by him. One test of leadership is also how well successors are able to carry forward a program. At ISRO, Professor U.R. Rao and Dr. K. Kasturangam brought further success and glory to the organization. After his retirement, Professor Dhawan continued as a member of the Space Commission and in that capacity continued to help the organization which he built. Remarkably, Professor Dhawan saw the space mission envisioned by him come into being in his lifetime. He also saw in his lifetime many of those yet tutor emerge as strong technology leaders themselves and who have contributed immeasurably to the country. What a great personality he was. After joining the DRDO, I started the Mission Missile Development Program there. During the Integrated Guided Missile Development Program, the focus was to design missiles with state-of-the-art performance at the time of deployment. The surface-to-surface missile Prithvi became the best in its class and users delight with its high accuracy, reliable performance and the maneuverable trajectories. The first stage of SLV-3 became handy to configure. Agni as a long-range deterrent. It blossomed from the REX re-entry experiment program conceived by my team in 81. Both Prithvi and Agni are in production and induction phase. Trishul, which is a surface-to-air missile, and Akash, once developed is complete, will be contemporary missiles. The third generation anti-tank Nag will dominate as one of the best such missiles. In any aerospace or missile development program, delays are possible owing to the technical complexities of the work, but this should not deter us. The propaganda of foreign sellers and their associates in India should not dictate India's procurement decisions. My experiment in dealing with the network of institutions that has been established is that our country has tremendous potential to develop the best technologies in this field. India could combat the MTCR very effectively, thereby proving to those who wanted us to fail that we can do it. Once we had developed competency in the design of missile systems, I looked beyond the IGMPD. DP. The natural course of action appeared to be the supersonic cruise missile, which is essential in tactical warfare. Many countries have cruise missiles, but they fly at subsonic speeds. Our association with one of the Russian institutes, NPO, Machinostrojenia, developed into a partnership in the joint design and development of supersonic cruise missile systems. This partnership is based upon friendship and equal competencies. I recall my association with Dr. H.A. Hefremo, Director General of NPO Machinostrojenia, an outstanding scientist of our time who had developed 7 types of cruise missiles and inducted the systems in the Russian Navy. Creating a joint venture between India and Russia and high technology projects in prevailing situations in 1990s became a complex question and a challenge to both Dr. Hefremo and me. Whenever I met Dr. Hefremo, I got the feeling of meeting a great scientist like Professor Satish Dhawan or Dr. Werner von Braun, the father of rocketry. Dr. Efremo took me to his technology center, which are not normally shown to any foreigners. He truly treated me as a friend and arranged an Indian lunch in his laboratory. I took him to the research center Imarat as Advanced Missile Technology Center and an Advanced Missile Technology Center at Hyderabad. He was genuinely pleased to see the strides we had made. Our scientific minds merged and our friendship blossomed. We christened the joint venture as BrahMos, a combination of names of 2 rivers, the Brahmaputra and the Moscow. Shivanath Pillai Ramanathan Venugopalan and Vice Admiral Bharat Bhushan, along with the Russian specialists, gave shape to the joint venture. Shivanath Pillai was the natural choice as the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of the joint venture, concurrently holding charge of DRDO as Chief Controller R&D for missiles. The dual role as exceptional decision of the government was essential to ensure the success of this venture. Venugopalan, an outstanding propulsion scientist from the Defense Research and Development Laboratory DRDL, became the project director. A new kind of joint venture came into existence, one which bridged the scientific community and the industry of the 2 countries in design, development, production and marketing of an advanced technology weapon. It was a source of great joy for me as it was for the 2 teams. The first flight of BrahMos on 12 June 2001 from the interim test range Chandipur was a milestone signaling the progress of the joint venture. The second flight on 28 April 2002 confirmed the results of the first and came as a great encouragement to our effort. Dr. Efremov and I glad that both India and Russia has realized that this joint venture is the right way to bridge two friendly nations for building high technology weapon system that could enter the world market. My dream of marketing an advanced weapon system ahead of the so-called developed countries will come true through BrahMos. Even though I am away from the from the scene, the team that I built has performed credibly, and I am happy. I read a book titled An Unfinished Dream by Milkman of India, Dr. Varghese Kurian. He says in the book, it was by chance that I became a dairyman, but a British expert's criticism, the sewer water of London is bacteriologically superior to the milk of Bombay, served as a challenge to the young Korean who has taken dairying from strength to strength over the decades, so that today India is a front ranker in milk production. On a visit to Anand, I had the opportunity to spend a day with him. As I went around the Amul establishment, I saw value addition at work. From milk, the cooperative has branched off to making numerous derivatives, including butter, cheese, ice cream. These initiatives have given it the strength to be a major player in the highly competitive market. When I asked him what is his view was one sure way of launching the country on a growth trajectory, his answer was you must build on the resources presented by our young professionals and by our nation's farmers. Without their involvement, we cannot succeed. With their involvement, we cannot fail. While talking about scientists, I recall my meeting with a medical specialist, Professor Karla Subbarao, an Indian American Cancer Institute at Hyderabad, Indo American Cancer Institute. I asked him if cancer was some unmitigated curse. He yes and no, said the 77-year-old Albert Einstein, professor of radiology. Yes, because we genetically inherit certain traits which make us vulnerable to cancer. No, because whether we get it or escape it depends largely on our immune response. Research into how the brain can influence immune response has given rise to the new field called immunology. Finding in this field have brought great hope to people dealing with such difficult illness as cancer, AIDS, CFIDS, chronic fatigue immune dysfunction syndrome, and other immune system related diseases. Our field of research includes psychoneurocardiology, the study of the mind-heart connection, or the psychoneurohematology, the study of how the mind can influence blood-related disorders such as clotting problems in hemophilia. Such is the power of thought. These are diseases which normally require intense treatment, but even here, medicine acknowledges that our minds can play a major role. Summary. Vision ignites the minds. India needs visionaries of the stature of J.R.D. Tata, Vikram Sarabhai, Satish Dhawan and Varghese Kurian, to name a few, who can involve an entire generation in mission-driven programs which benefits the country as a whole. Thank you.